Let's go to the big three.
Number 3.
This is of a piece with the president seeming to imagine that this man, Putin, with whom he says he has a great relationship, is a man of peace. The evidence of that, it seems to me, particularly at this point, is extremely thin.
That is the great Brit Hume. They can win, Mr. President. Ukraine's daring double attacks on bridges, trains, and military bases shows you Russia may be thugs, but as military, they are not studs.
Number 2.
This is really something what's happened. We've created over 500,000 new jobs in a short period of time, secured nearly $15 trillion, new investments that are going into our country.
And that's what the president's got to do. Explain the one big, beautiful bill. It gets roasted by Musk and propelled forward by Thune, Johnson, and Trump. We look at the explosive term defining this explosive piece of legislation that will be defining the president's term.
Number 1.
I really have thought long and hard about this, is to follow my own compass. I think we need to stop thinking in boxes and think outside of our boxes and not be so partisan.
What? KJP, yes, the former press secretary for Joe Biden, in a baffling announcement, worst press secretary in American history, leaves her party and is about to blow up perhaps Biden, her co-workers, her party. I don't know. Gillian, you are in Washington. Great to see you, by the way.
You too.
You're in Washington every single day. Are you stunned between the Tapper book, where he suddenly realizes that Joe Biden might not have an A game, to this? Is this the bigger surprise?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I will say, look, everybody's got to make a buck, right? Why are you hating on them? I'm just kidding. No one, I forget. I mean, people can't see my face.
Yeah. But you're being sarcastic, but you're just saying, for the longest time, she told everybody that Joe Biden has been great. And now she says, in The Independent, the story of the broken White House.
Broken White House. But what? At the same time, Brian, so she wants to now separate herself from everything that happened the last 4 years, but she also wants to do it without criticizing the president or too many of her former colleagues. And it's like, this is one of the most public figures, political figures in America, right? This was the face of the White House for 4 years, or not the entire, most of the 4 years. If you're going to then break with the administration that you represented, you got to have a real good explanation. You can't wake up and say, well, now I'm going independent. What does that mean?
So I'll give you an example. If Joe Manchin said, I'm going independent, I go, all right. If you have John Fetterman says, I'm going independent, I go, well, kind of makes sense. There's nothing middle of the road for her, because I watched her on MSNBC, and you probably did too. You probably could see some cuts of her. She's like the squat. I mean, she's way to the left. So to be independent now means that you're going somewhere or running from something to find a new home. Do you see some of the anonymous quotes about what kind of job she did and how she was? People did not respect her inside the White House, let alone the press corps.
There was massive consensus, right, in Washington that she was not only was she not great in her role, but she was nowhere near as good as Jen Psaki had been. And there was that unfortunate, you get compared
she was
to
really
your predecessor.
Good. Jen Psaki was excellent.
Right. The thing is, she never explained her own. We know about Jen Psaki, right? And it's not just because she has her own show on MS now. We know a little bit about her story and her family. Karine never once, not even in those like Vogue interviews that she did or Vanity Fair or whatever it was, talk about how she sees the world and how she wants things to be. And
exactly.
So it's like, okay, she's going independent. But it's like, I guess that makes as much sense as anything else about her because we have no idea.
Exactly. I mean, what she was.
We don't know what she stands for.
Remember she told us her first day, what made her special? Black lesbian first. All right. That's what you wanted to stand you out. That old identity politics, which she's welcoming. Marc Halpern offered some analysis today. Cut 5.
There's still a lot we don't know. And so I hope she adds that historical record. Amazingly, the officials who are identified in the Tapper-Thompson book as being involved with the attempt to cover up, I don't call it a cover up because there was nothing to cover up. It was all on C-SPAN and Fox News. Those officials haven't reacted. Now, I haven't seen them quoted anywhere explaining their position. Now, as you know, some Republicans in Congress would like them to come up and testify. And if that happens, maybe we'll get more of the truth. But I'm all for her adding to the historical record. But if she doesn't acknowledge what everybody in America saw in real time about Joe Biden's decline, I think it's going to be difficult for her to argue that this book's got credibility.
That's just it. I don't get what her position is. If she's going to be like Jill Biden and say her husband's fine, all right, but nobody thinks that. And Anita Dunn tried to get rid of her. Jeff Zeitz tried to get her another job. Other people thought she did a terrible job defending President Biden. Had to look at her binder because she didn't know the issues. You know this because you had a job in the State Department. You know what people's like when they're staffers who get the issue even better than the principal. She was the opposite. I think Jen Psaki could have set policy.
There's even, yes, exactly. She could have been and probably was, like Dana was to President Bush, a policy advisor, right? I mean, you start trusting your press secretary's judgment so much.
Ari Fleischer, too.
You're then and Ari, of course, yeah. She did not follow that model because, as we are now learning from reporting that came out yesterday, more details today, she was very consumed by her own sort of PR profile while she was doing the White House job. Apparently, she got in trouble with colleagues for including her like PR rep that she hired, somebody in New York, including them on emails that she was sending from her official government email with other White House staff talking about White House business. I mean, she was working hard to try and get her own name out there at the same time she was doing this. So actually, in that perspective, the book's not surprising. Also, I think it was Jesse yesterday made an amazing point, which is like, okay, you don't write a book this long in how many months is it now since the administration? February, March,
10 weeks.
You don't write a like 300 something page book in that amount of time. So she was working on the book while she was still working at the White House.
Although Tapper claims that he started the book in November, but who knows?
Well, I guess if you have a ghostwriter, but she didn't decide in the last 3 months that she was going to go independent and write and get a publishing deal for an entire book.
Gillian Turner with us. Gillian, what is the problem with John Kirby? And evidently, they did not get along. This is an admiral, the new military. You had a hostage situation, the Afghanistan situation, the Hamas the horrific attack. You needed a military expert there. What was the problem?
Well, so the story goes that everybody knew that, what you just said. Everybody recognized, we need a face in here who, put it this, first of all, the White House wanted to replace Jen Psaki only with a woman. So they picked Karine for the job, understanding that she was going to work in tandem with Kirby, right? Like whenever there was a big story or whenever there was anything relating to national security, foreign policy, the military, he was going to step in. And this was agreed to ahead of time. But then as this played out, Karine did not want that. She did not want to share the podium with him. And so she made a concerted effort within the White House with staff to kind of push him out whenever possible. And, those briefings suffered when he needed to be there and he wasn't there.
All right, let's talk about another area. First off, how long were you in the State Department? Is that where you were? I
was a staffer at the White House and the National Security Council 4 years. The last 2 years of the Bush administration, the first 2 of Obama, because I was not a political appointee, so you keep going. I worked in the State Department only before my current job where I'm covering it as an intern for 6 months, full-time. It was like my junior year of college. I took off a whole semester to go work there full-time.
Who's your supervisor?
And they were like...
Anybody I would know?
A guy named... well, this is going to date me, but It was at the end of Colin Powell's tenure as Secretary of State. No joke. The person who I reported to is a diplomat named Mike Kozak, who's been around a long time. He might even still be at state now. He's like a career ambassador. He's been to like 10 different countries. So I had a foot in the door at state before I started covering it, meaning like I know how things work and I know how, how everything goes down, how the sausage is made.
So when you see what's going on with Ukraine right now, and the State Department's got to do some work, but you have a guy running the State Department who's also National Security Advisor. At the same time, you got NATO summits going on. You have trade talks happening, let alone the border issue. This is pretty amazing what's on Rubio's plate, right?
It is super interesting. I'm borderline obsessed with the fact that he is now in these two roles, and he's the first person in forever to do this. I asked Tammy Bruce, this was on the record, like maybe 2-3 weeks ago, because I've only been back from maternity leave like 3 weeks now. So sometime in the last 3 weeks.
Second child.
I asked Tammy, like, how does he feel about this? Because it's been unclear, right? Like if he was gung-ho for this or if he was kind of dragged into it. And she said, honestly, Gillian, he's joyous. Those were her words, joyous at doing both jobs. He loves it.
He's also an archivist, too. They say that...
And he's the archivist. And, Brian, he just, in case anybody's, keeping tabs on him, he's over at the White House every day. He comes over to state to, like, do what he needs to do, greet, foreign dignitaries when they arrive, have meetings, but he's at the White House. He is very focused on the president.
Which is interesting because they say when Kissinger did both jobs, he was never at the White House.
Right, exactly.
It was the opposite.
Yep.
So, I thought Mike Waltz did a great job. I'm a big fan. I think he's going to be an impact player, UN ambassador.
Same.
And is so knowledgeable, knows the military, knows diplomacy, worked for Cheney, did his own housework, Green Beret.
I think it's the White House's loss that he's not there.
I still don't get
anymore.
What do you think the story is there?
Well, so some people have been saying all along, like, this is not going to work because, we all know Mike Waltz from our air because as a member of Congress, he came and talked to us all the time. He's a foreign policy hawk on Russia, on Putin in particular. My point being,
Iran.
on Iran, on Ukraine and Russia, he knows that Putin's a bad guy. He knows what side the United States is on. He doesn't exactly align with the MAGA folks on all the foreign policy issues.
Neither does Rubio, though.
It was a little, right, exactly, which is one of the reasons I'm so obsessed with Rubio's role in this administration is like, how is he making all of this happen? The president loves him.
Yep. Listen, we're going to take a time out, have some more quality time with Gillian Turner. She's going to be hosting Martha's show today, right?
I am, 3 p.m.
At 3 p.m. Eastern time. Don't move. You listen to the Brian Kilmeade Show. All right, we got a few more minutes with Gillian. Gillian, have you looked at the format today? I know you're doing Martha's show at 3. Do you have a rough idea what you guys are doing today?
I legit have no idea, Brian, and I would have prepared had I known you were going to ask me that question because I'm sure it's an amazing lineup of guests.
Right.
Trina's filling in this week. She's doing a fantastic job. We've gotten all kinds of bookings, so going to have to put that on ice, but it is going to be really great.
So here's what I know for sure.
That was the worst tease in the history.
No, but you left a lot of questions. It makes me want to tune
radio and television.
It wasn't the lot you left a lot of intrigue out there. But here's what I know you're going to be running with. The most interesting thing in afternoon television is the Oval Office meetings with other world leaders.
Yeah.
So you got the Chancellor of Germany, who seems to be anti-Israel these days and very pro-Ukraine, looking to develop long-range missiles to go right into Russia and commits to 5% defense spending. What do you think Trump's going to do today? Because, he's got the German heritage.
And I don't know how to say it, but he likes MERS.
He seems to.
He likes the leader, which, as you know, goes a really long way with him. So I don't think we're going to see a Cyril Ramaphosa or Vladimir Zelensky style showdown. I could easily be dead wrong, but I wouldn't predict that. He's also trying. I mean, he wants all the reporting the last couple of weeks has been Germany is turning on Israel. Right? We had the foreign minister here 2 weeks ago. He met with Rubio at the end of May. I interviewed him right after he met with Rubio, and I said, like, what's the deal? Did you guys get into this? Did he, kind of like take you to task over the fact that you guys are publicly very much pivoting away? I mean, you're threatening to withhold weapon shipments. You're criticizing Israel's humanitarian conduct. And he said, no, we're still 100% behind Israel. And I said, well, but you're not. If you watch what Germany is doing and saying, you are very much not at all behind Israel any longer. And it's been this slow pivot that suddenly ramped up very recently. Like, what is the IDF? What is Netanyahu doing that is, irritating you in this way? He wouldn't budge. He's not going to say, we've made a strategic decision to not back the Israelis anymore. But everybody knows that's what they're doing.
But Gillian, we only had a minute left, but you know that the Israelis are not going to sit on the sideline if these talks continue to linger with Iran. This is there. Even though President Trump said don't, Reagan said the same thing. Bush said the same thing. He bombed Syria and he bombed Iraq.
That's right.
Because they had nuclear weapons.
That's right.
So they're going to take action.
And Netanyahu, exactly. And Netanyahu, I think, cares less and less about what the U.S. thinks. Not necessarily Trump,
certainly,
but like
Biden.
The U.S. In general.
Right. Because they got to worry about themselves, and also they got them in a place where their nuclear arsenal is vulnerable. It's not going to be the case for much longer.
And they have also been dragged through the mud, right? In terms, the U.S. the U.S. spends all its time fighting about what to do.
Gillian Turner, thanks so much. We'll see you at 3 o'clock today with a great, intriguing show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Marc Thiessen joins us now. Marc, first off, we have so much to talk about on KJP, saying essentially the broken presidency, turning on her party. What can you put this in perspective? Does it remind you of any moment in recent history outside Scott McClellan, who had legitimate issues and, he blew up the Bush White House and probably regrets it? I can't believe this one.
Well, first of all, she says that they have to think outside of boxes. I'd like to see her think outside of a binder.
Yes.
That's something she was unable to do from the podium. The literally dumb as a bucket of rocks. The worst press secretary in the history of our country. Couldn't speak in complete sentences. Couldn't. I think she referred to like bipartisan, bicameral legislation because she didn't know what bicameral meant. This is the White House press secretary. She would read stuff. She was like the perfect press secretary for Joe Biden because she would read stuff that she didn't understand and say things that she had no idea what she was saying. So she and Biden were kind of a match, except she didn't have the excuse of age for her cognitive impairment.
So here is the subtitle: A Look Inside a Broken White House. So I assume she's going to blow up Biden, and then people say, no, she's not. So they said Democratic groups are chatting back and forth and saying how they wanted her to quit. Anita Dunn tried to get her to leave. Jeff Zeitz wanted to nudge her out. They lined up other jobs for her. She was jealous of Admiral Kirby and wouldn't let him pick her own reporters to answer. So basically, now everybody that was holding their fire because she was a black lesbian are going after her.
Yeah, the only reason that John Kirby was not the White House spokesman was because he was a white male, and they weren't going to fire a black female, especially a LGBT black female, from the job. It's the same reason they got Kamala Harris as the vice president, as the presidential nominee, because because the party of identity politics was not going to kick the first black woman vice president to the curb. So they went to the mat with her, and it really worked out, didn't it? They're paying the price for their identity politics, but instead of learning the lesson and promoting talent and doing it on merit, they're doubling down on stupidity.
What would you do for Republicans and the whole auto pen controversy and the oversight investigation? You're never going to get Joe Biden to testify. You're never going to get the Politburo to admit that he was lost it. Do you feel as though this might be a loss before it starts, or you think it's worth the investigation?
It has to be investigated. I mean, this is the biggest political cover-up in your and my lifetime. The fact the president was more mentally compromised and incapable of doing the job, and that a bunch of unelected aides, not since Woodrow Wilson had a stroke and his wife was essentially the president have we had a situation like this. And look, first of all, I think it's a disqualifier for anybody in the cabinet, any of these people who want to run for president. I think that shuts them out. But the truth is that the people who I actually want to investigate are the Jake Tappers of the world. The people, Biden is gone. His aides are gone. They're all out in the wilderness. They're still, Jake Tapper's running around reporting on this like he's he's Bob Woodward, discovering Watergate. Where were you when this was all happening? I've got a basic standard for who I take seriously on this issue. Were you talking about it before the debate or after the debate? If you're talking about it after the debate, you were just doing CYA and trying to save your party from an electoral defeat. If you're talking about this before the debate, you can be taken seriously. The Annie Linskys of the world who reported on this, I just drove my daughter. I picked her up from school and had like an 8-hour drive each way. So I actually read Jake Tapper's book, and what's amazing is how he talks about how some in the media trash the Annie Linsky Wall Street Journal story. It's like, yeah, Olivier Darcy at CNN did. You talked about how the Wall Street Journal is funded by Rupert Murdoch and News Corp. On the air, you were trashing it. So was your network. And there's no self-reflection whatsoever. This is why credibility of the media is absolutely in the tank. Why most Americans believe that the media is completely biased is because Russia collusion conspiracy theory, total lie. They pushed it. Steele dossier, they pushed it. The Hunter Biden laptop, they suppressed it. Joe Biden cognitive decline. How dare you make fun of his stutter? It's like they're political hacks. And until they change, no one's going to believe them.
Anyone who believes they're going to change hasn't paid attention to the cancer diagnosis. They said that he just got cancer the other day. Really? No one believes that. No one believes or no one could be that irresponsible to not get a prostate exam while holding the highest office since 2014. So they're still lying to you.
I had the same health care that Joe Biden did when I was at the White House, right? Yeah. So if you're a member of the senior staff, they took me to Walter Reed. When I became a member of the senior staff, they took me to Walter Reed, and they did every test known to man on me. Because I had not been taking care of myself. Every blood test, I had a colonoscopy. I had, the PSA test. I had everything done to me. I had the same care that Joe Biden did. If they missed the fact that he has stage 4 metastatic cancer, then that is, either they're the worst doctors in the world and the worst healthcare system of the world, or somebody's lying.
Man, there's so many things. You have this great column on Chinese in our higher, what should we be doing with foreign students when it comes to our education, highest education? You say Stanford is a case study on how Beijing infiltrates U.S. universities. In what way?
So the editors of the two reporters at the Stanford Review, which is the conservative student newspaper at Stanford, did probably what the Washington Post and the New York Times and other newspapers should have done, is they actually investigated Chinese infiltration of Stanford. And they went and they interviewed a lot of these Chinese students who are on campus. And what they told them is, I've got a handler. And the handler, I have to check in once a week with the handler, and I have to hand over my research reports, and I have to report on what I'm doing in my lab, and I have to hand in the results of my lab work, and I have to hand in, and I also have to report on other Chinese nationals to tell them if they're saying anything in favor of the Dalai Lama or critical of China while they're over here. It's the Chinese students. Some of them do it willingly because they want to get ahead, but some of them it's international repression, where the Chinese Ministry of State Security, if they don't turn in their reports, their families get hauled into the police station in China, and then they call them from the police station, we have your parents here, are you going to turn in your report? So this is a huge spying network that's been created. Some of them want to do it. Some of them are being forced to do it, but it's a threat to our national security.
Okay, and by the way, that's why the president says we had to pull back on the 150,000 Chinese students, especially at our elite education. They call Harvard the party school, not because they party, but because it's a communist party, sends their kids there. So I want to go
like that.
I want to go to Ukraine. I want to go to Ukraine. Very few people know more about what's going on than you in the country. Here's Britt Hume on the brilliance of these military operations and who Vladimir Putin really is. Cut 16.
In the midst of efforts by President Trump to broker a ceasefire, whose terms Ukraine has repeatedly agreed to, Putin has not agreed to much of anything. He sent a delegation to Istanbul that basically did nothing. He has now stepped up his attacks on civilians in Ukraine, in response to which Ukraine, by the most ingenious methods, attacks what are unmistakably military targets inside Russia. Now Putin says, well, I'm going to have to respond to that, as if to say to the president, well, Mr. President, I'm sorry, but we can talk about peace later, but in the meantime, I got to respond to this. And the president, although there may be things in this call that we don't know about, but based on what his statement said, he seems to think, well, okay, then we'll deal with it later. This is of a piece with the president seeming to imagine that this man Putin, with whom he says he has a great relationship, is a man of peace. The evidence of that, it seems to me, particularly at this point, is extremely thin.
Your thoughts? Is there more than we need to know?
So this is, first of all, this is the greatest military operation since Bibi Netanyahu and the pager operation.
Followed up by the walkie-talkies.
So ingenious. And followed by the walkie-talkies. This was, and you know what? There may be a walkie-talkie attack coming too. So this may not be over yet. They planned this for over a year. It's just in execution, it's brilliant. Number one. Number two, they had every right to do it because these were the planes that they were using to bomb to launch missiles at civilian residential neighborhoods. The very attacks that Donald Trump has been outraged by. And so Ukraine has every right to defend itself. And three, this gives Trump leverage. The Ukrainians do, because Putin is, he sits there and he gets on the phone with Trump, and while he's on the phone with Trump, they launch a bombing campaign on Kyiv, attacking residential neighborhoods, killing dozens of civilians, targeting civilians. He's laughing at him, and he thinks that he's got the momentum. And now the Ukrainians have momentum. Now the Ukrainians are on the offensive, and they're striking deep into Russia and causing him pain. That gives Trump leverage at the negotiating table. He should support these kinds of attacks, because if Putin's going to do it, then why should Zelensky have to sit back and take it? While he's waiting for Putin to come around and support peace that he's never going to do.
What about the detonation of the bridge underwater?
Love it. And, the other thing that, the innovation that Ukraine has had in warfare is going to affect the world beyond, the Ukrainians, for example, have taken out half of the Russian Black Sea fleet. They don't have a navy. They did it with sea drones. They sunk the Moskva, the pride of the Black Sea Fleet. The Russian Navy has had to pull back from Ukrainian waters because they're afraid that their Navy is going to get destroyed. You know who's watching that? Taiwan. Because the Chinese Navy has to get across the Taiwan Strait to reach Taiwan if they want to invade them. Taiwan doesn't need to have bombers and fighter jets to stop that. They just need the same sea drones that the Ukrainians built that they were using to take out the Chinese Navy in the same way. So that attack, what's happening with these bomber attacks, this is going to transform warfare in a way that's going to be in our favor for a long time to come.
So Vladimir Putin vows a retaliation. No kidding. That's called 3 years. What were you holding back from?
He's not been holding back. What escalation could he possibly do? He's been escalating he's been escalating for 3 years, and he's been escalating especially in the last few months while Trump's trying to get him to talk to peace. And I will tell you something. I don't think it's a coincidence that yesterday Donald Trump at 1:56 tweeted out a post about his conversation with Putin, and at 2:01 he tweeted out saying Congress needs to give me a sanctions bill so that I have leverage with Putin at the negotiating table. Something happened in that conversation that made Trump realized I need leverage to force this guy to the table and coerce him into peace, because he's not going to go willingly. And I think Congress needs to respond to that and pass the sanctions bill. and give Trump the leverage he needs to crush the Russian economy if Putin doesn't agree to peace.
I'll tell you what, NATO has stepped up. This new chancellor of Germany is going to put more money into defense for real. I look forward to that meeting today because he's also developing long-range missiles to give to Ukraine to hit deeper into Russia. Unlike Joe Biden, this guy's not scared. Marc, lastly, the Grand Ayatollah has turned down the last peace initiative or the nuclear initiative from Steve Witkoff to get rid of the nuclear program and enrich down to zero. What are we waiting for?
Look, I completely support Donald Trump doing everything he can to resolve this peacefully because nobody wants to have to do this militarily. But the reality is there may be no option but the military option, and Iran is incredibly weak right now. They've never been more vulnerable. Their air defenses are down. Their ballistic missile capability has been taken out. All their terror proxies are on their heels. They've lost Syria and their pipeline for weapons. They've never been in a position, one, more vulnerable to a military attack, and two, less capable of retaliating for a military attack. And that window will close eventually. So I want to do it peacefully, but if we have to do it militarily, and all these people running around saying, "Oh, we're going to start another war in the Middle East like Iraq," it's like, did Trump start another war in the Middle East when he took out Qasem Soleimani?
Yeah.
No. No one's talking about sending U.S. troops into Iran to overthrow the regime and set up a coalition provisional authority.
Gotcha.
That's not something anybody is discussing. We're talking about eliminating their nuclear program. Period. Full stop. And that's a doable thing. Yes.
If you go on their word, then they get sanctions relief and they give more money to Hezbollah and Hamas. We're back to where we started. This just in, Chinese President Xi on Thursday held a phone call with President Trump at the latter's request. That according to the Chinese embassy in the U.S. More on that in just a moment. Marc, always fascinating talking to you. Go get him.
Talking to you, Brian. Take care.
I think we're doing the funniest version of Glenn Ross you'll ever see. Not because we're twisting the words or changing anything. Yeah. It's just we have comedy backgrounds, most of us. So we're just looking for those moments, and we're playing that timing. I'm playing us, hopefully, trying to play a spirited version of Shelley, somebody who really, really believes he's about to make his big score. Absolutely has no second thoughts about that.
And that is Bob Odenkirk talking about the play that's playing right around the block from us. Glenn Ross, David Mamet, the award-winning playwright and author of the new book, The Disenlightenment, Politics, Horror, and Entertainment. David, welcome to the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Thank you, Brian. Nice to be here.
So do you still go every night to the play?
Oh, God, no. I don't live in the United States. I live in California. And so I'm on the other side of the country.
Okay, but did you get it up and running?
No. It was directed by Patrick Marber in a terrific production. And after I've done a play once, if I'm not directing a revival, I'll just stay away. There's nothing for me to do. I got better things to do with my life, and they got better things to do with their life than to listen to me to say that's not the way that we did it when the dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Oh, so in other words, a while ago, and you talked about that when the movie came out. You made the role for Alec Baldwin. Here he is talking about it. Cut 43.
Only one thing counts in this life. Get them to sign on the line which is dotted. A, B, C. A, always, B, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. Attention, do I have your attention? Interest, are you interested? I know you are. You close or you hit the bricks. Decision, have you made your decision for Christ?
That is, he was great in that, right? And why was he perfect for it?
Yeah.
What made him perfect for it, David?
Well, I wrote the part for him. I did, they were doing this movie. Jamie Foley just died, rest in peace. Directed a spectacular production of the movie Glenn Ross, of the play, and Alec was going to play a part, but he was restricted because a studio had him on hold for a project which didn't come through. So someone else played the part, and Alec called me up when the studio let him go. We were about to shoot, and he said, "I want to be in the movie. What can we do?" I said, "The part's gone." He said, "Write me another part." So I did.
And it was worth it. Also, he's from Massapequa, too. And his dad was a teacher at my Massapequa High School, so I know the whole family. So didn't get to know him, though. He was a little bit older. So David, let's talk about what your passion for politics comes from. When did it really take root in your life?
Well, I got kicked out of the left about 25 years ago, and I had to stand back and say, wait a second, I'm a lifelong Democrat. My parents were first-generation immigrant Jews. Everybody was a Democrat. We didn't know any Republicans because, as far as we knew, they all lived in the country clubs from which we were restricted, and they all wore white belts and drank Manhattans. So I didn't know any Republicans. So I didn't understand what conservatism was. And then I got kicked out of the left, and I started researching what the constitutional conservatism was about. And I got very, very interested and very excited about it. And here I am now.
How did you get kicked out of the left?
I was doing a play on Broadway, Paul, a very funny play called November, about a president of the United States who's about to lose an election because he doesn't have any money because, as they say, his numbers are lower than Gandhi's cholesterol. And the Village Voice said, well, write an article promoting the play. It was called November. And so I wrote an article called Political Civility. I said, we have to be civil to each other. That's what this play is finally about. It makes fun not of a politician, but of politics. But we have to be civil to each other. I said, I'm not even civil to myself. I even refer to myself as a brain-dead liberal. That's not civil. Next week, the Village Voice comes out, the whole front page, Why I Am No Longer a Brain-Dead Liberal by David Mamet, and everybody lost my number. So I have, like Trump, after the 2020 election, I had a little bit of time to think about things.
And that made you dig in more rather than change. Now, instead of taking a back step, you step forward and just reinforced your conservative beliefs?
Well, I discovered my conservative beliefs because I discovered everything I thought I believed about the Democratic Party was false, that the Democratic Party had always been the party of, first off, slavery, and then of segregation, then of Jim Crow, and that affirmative action was just an extension of that. And the Democratic Party was not representing the working people of this country, wasn't representing the actual Americans. It had become a party of the elites. And I started to go back and reread Hayek, and I was very close friends with Shelby Steele, was friends with Tom Sowell, and went back to the original, right? I went back to J.S. Mill and Locke and tried to understand what a constitutional democracy is. And I liked it. I liked it a whole lot, because the whole idea was, let's all get together and decide according to the rules, which we have enshrined when we were not emotional. Let's decide according to those rules what we're going to do now that we are emotional.
Just take a step back. Before I really build on that, I want to just take one step back that I've not got a good answer for. If you are successful in your business as a playwright, as an actor, as an actress, it's all meritocracy. I don't care who you know, you might get a part. But if you're not good, if you can't produce under pressure, you're not going to do well. Why wouldn't that mindset transfer into the love of capitalism and appreciation for hard work? Why wouldn't there be more David Mamets in that world and less socialists?
Well, that's a very good question. What I saw when I was beginning to understand conservatism was that theater was at that point a complete meritocracy. That if you could get the asses in the seats, you could pay the rent on your apartment, and if you get enough asses on the seats, you could buy a house. And that the audience at that time didn't care what your politics were. The problem was, as things became very corporatized and things became corporatized in the media, they became homogenized, and actors started just like anyone else. Look at Karine Jean-Pierre and what's his name, Tapper, all of a sudden came out and they wanted to make more money off of the horrors which they'd inflicted on us personally by saying, gosh, we didn't know. I get it. So that actors who were concerned and writers who were concerned about their place wanted to hedge their bets by saying, I'm a liberal too. And it started in the 60s, doing plays about diseases, right? Cancer is bad, fighting cancer is good. Blah, 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 blindness is bad, fighting blindness is good. Okay, then it became plays about social consciousness. Black people are people too, gay people are people too. But the problem with that is everybody knows that. So that we don't want to come to a theater or a movie to get lectured to, right? Our wives will do that. So that in order to keep their place, the idea of a meritocracy crumbled in the media, so that awards and safety, or the illusion of same, was awarded to those who could scream loudest, "I'm good," and I'll tell you who's bad, so you can hate them and get a kick out of that.
Got it. So the Disenlightenment, politics, horror, and entertainment. When did we start moving? When did we stop being trying on a path to enlightenment? Why did it become disenlightenment?
Well, there's two reasons that I think everything in life is organic. It's organic means it's born, it lives, it decays, and it dies. And there are two reasons why any organism decays and dies. One is it's unsuccessful, and the other is that it is successful. So just as with a tree, if you don't prune the tree wants to put out more branches, to get more light. But if you don't prune the branches once in a while, the branch structure overwhelms the root structure, and the tree gets blown down. So as our country became more and more and more successful, we got people in power who wanted to double down on building their power. Why not? Right? They're human beings. The problem is that, for example, in California, if the taxes go up, which means that the revenue goes down. As the revenue goes down, the people in the democratic state know only one way to increase revenue, which is to increase taxes. Okay? So the people that you're taxing away don't add to what you're doing. They don't add to the revenue stream, so you keep increasing taxes, and the state dies. So that's what we've seen in California, and in fact in all in the blue states, that they don't have the capacity to cut, to prune. They don't have the capacity to say, "I get it."
Yep.
But we're going to restrain ourselves.
But David, don't you feel optimistic that as you see the decay in the cities like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, and the lack of being able to rebuild in Pacific Palisades, that people are beginning to realize the model doesn't work? All we get is more homelessness, higher taxes. People are voting with their feet. Do you feel as though America is self-correcting again?
Well, America is self-correcting again, as we saw in the election. Nationally, it's self-correcting again, and the red states are thriving. The question is what's going to happen to the other states. And the answer is, I don't know. I mean, my hope for this wonderful state of California, this is the most beautiful spot in the world, is that the Hispanic population, which a super hardworking population and a growing population and a religious population, is going to take the Spanish land grants back, and vote us into conservatism again.
Yeah, it would be great. I saw, I've been watching you doing your press tour. I saw you on with Bill Maher the other day. I just want to let the audience hear a little of your exchange. Let's watch.
I don't have to imagine what he did in 2020, which was never concede the election. I'm not even.
Dude, he didn't have to concede the election. He lost. If somebody is beaten in a prize fight and the other guy gets the belt, the person who's beaten does not have to concede. It's not necessary. He's lost.
Well, it is necessary. The analogy falls down because that if a prize fighter loses, it doesn't inspire people to riot.
How did he inspire people to riot?
By not conceding the election.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, cute, huh?
I liked it. And he went back. For one thing, he can have real conversations. You could disagree with him on his own show. It's great. And you went on to say, yeah, he did not inspire people to riot. And you also went on to say, too, is that Trump called you after your interview with Bill Maher, and he said, hey, go the rest of the way and defend me on 2020, right?
That's exactly right. But see, Bill, who's I like him very much. We get along very, very well. But he's he's in a very difficult position because his rice bowl is playing to a liberal audience. I get it. And on the other hand, he's capable of thinking clearly from time to time. But what he did to me is a perfect example of magical thinking, because he said that people, quote, rioted at January 6th because Trump did not say these two words, I concede. Had Trump said those words, that would have had the power to alter history. So this is magical thinking, exactly on the level of saying that Jews poison wells.
I hear you. And by the way, just to keep people up to date, the president did announce about an hour ago he had a 90-minute conversation with President Xi, at which time they agreed to visit each other's countries and a positive and move forward on trade. That's all they talked about. And now the president's meeting with the Chancellor of Germany, and it's always intriguing to see them in the Oval Office. Final thought, David, as we look at this book, Disenlightenment, Politics, Horror, and Entertainment, you're listening, my audience is very into these subjects, and you go deep into it. What will we discover in your book in reading it?
Well, here's what I think. I think there are a bunch of essays on various topics, but what I did in the book is at the end, I tried to draw it all together and say, what are we seeing? How are open borders related to Queers for Palestine? How are they related to global warming? How are they related to covering up COVID? And what I came up with was there's nobody home. It's not that we have an evil administration during the Biden administration. We had no administration. So the underlings, the cat being away, the underlings played, and they sat around the table saying, okay, you can have open borders if I get to pull out of Afghanistan. Susie, what do you want? Oh, I want Queers for Palestine. Okay, you can have that if Bob gets to put drag shows in the high school. So what we're looking at is what was called an open city. For example, Paris in 1944, the Nazis got out of town, the Allies had not yet come in, so you had a bunch of little groups, each with its own depredation and each with its own territory, fighting each other. And in the midst of that, because there was no law, you had people settling scores, saying, well, I'm not a communist, I'm not a capitalist, I'm not a resistant, but I got a big grocery bill, I'm going to shoot the grocer. So that's what we saw and do. That's what I'm saying in the book. That's the totalitarian, the totality of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, David, I'm just encouraged by, I feel like we're really woken up to a lot of these issues and we're fixing them in real time. And President Trump is doing it. And I think the majority of the American people who aren't even political understand there's a logic and a common sense to it that I think is back. So pick up David Mamet's book, Disenlightenment, Politics, Horror, and Entertainment. Thanks, David, for your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's good talking to you, Brian.
Same here.